We're going to start with one of my favorite sessions of the day. That is this award that we created last year, the Trailblazers. Pioneers in the integration of North America. We want to recognize these 5 people that have been not just mentors, but fighters and trailblazers in the relationship. Without them, and obviously many other people around them who establish rules, institutions. For us, institutions is the best part of the story of North America. When NAFTA was created, not just NAFTA, the NatBank, the rules of engagement, many institutions in which we are now working on this friendship between the 3 countries. So we're going to start with the recognition. We have Carlos Gutierrez. Is not here with us. Carlos, former Secretary of Commerce of the U.S. But Carlos, and you will see it in a moment in a video, he worked here in Mexico for many years, and he expressed that he learned how to work in this relationship here in Mexico. You will see a video of Carlos and the rest of the awardees. Jaime Serra, also a mentor, teacher, and an institution here in Mexico. Also former Secretary of Commerce in Mexico. And unfortunately, he's traveling in Europe right now, super active, still in the relationship, and we want to honor him also today. Juan Gallardo, yesterday in the dinner at Bellas Artes, one of you who went to that dinner, his nephew, Santiago Cortina, received the award on behalf of Juan Gallardo. Juan is also traveling in Europe in one of his board committees. And Juan, it's business leader, and I think the lesson on his side is you can spend a lot of time in your business, you can spend a lot of time in your family, but you still can spend time on social endeavors. And for him, this social endeavor is participating always as a business leader in the integration of North America. He spent a lot of time in Washington and in Canada during the negotiation, the first negotiation, and then the second renegotiation a couple of years ago, and a true mentor for many of us. Tom D'Aquino from Canada, also as Juan, business leader. He's former president of the Business Council of Canada. We have here Golding Hyder, who is now the president of the Business Council of Canada. And I know all the Canadians in the room see Tom as a mentor, as a teacher, a great guy, author of a couple of books. And his lesson is also the participation of the business sector in all of this is relevant, is important, and we need to do it. And obviously Carla Hills. Carla is here with us. We're gonna have a conversation with her. Yesterday when she arrived, not yesterday, the day before, we had an amazing conversation. Carla, thank you so much for being here. You're a true leader. I spoke yesterday with many people in this room, and they all have a particular moment in their lives that you were part of that. Either you as a USTR representative or as a speaker, teacher, mentor. So you are a true leader in this relationship. Thank you so much. So with that, I'm gonna pass to a 10-minute video from 3 of our trailblazers. And after that, we're gonna start the conversation with Carla.
I would like to begin by congratulating Enrique and all his team for the many, many years of hard work and dedication that he's put into everything that has to do with North America. Enrique, you've done an outstanding job, and we're all very privileged to be a part of that team and have been that way for many, many years. Also, just the thought of sharing with my colleagues here, a prize of this importance is enormously thrilling. I won't go by mentioning each one of the other prize winners, which are more than deserved, but each and every one of them, we have been united for years in this effort, and there's a very strong friendship and recognition and feeling of pride among all of us. So thank you all, and just being a part of this team is enormously thrilling. Enormous work has been done during all these years. The results we all know, they're absolutely fantastic. And they are the genesis of what is today North America and everything that has to do with nearshoring. People talk about nearshoring as if it was discovered yesterday. It started with the free trade agreement and all the transformations the free trade agreement has generated over the many years. We have every reason to be very proud of it, and we have every reason to be perfectly aware of the enormous challenge ahead to make it all the more a reality. I think we're very privileged to be a part of that teamwork, and I'm sure that all of us will be very much as committed as always to making that happen. Ahead of us is a learning curve, of course, but also ahead of us is assisting enormously in terms of making sure that everyone understands and participates in this enormous transformation that we can call the new North America. And in that sense, I'm sure this meeting will be very, very successful. It's in that context that I just want to thank you for this prize. I feel very honored, very pleased, very privileged to be a part of this. And I very much look forward to many, many years ahead between all of us of making this every time more a great reality for our country, for the US, and for Canada. Thank you all very much.
Queridos amigos, querida amigas, dear friends, chers amis. Proudly wearing the Aguia Azteca on my lapel, it is a great honor to share a few moments with you in Mexico City on the occasion of this year's North Capital Forum. Congratulations to you, Enrique, and the organizers of the forum. You're working hard to bring together leaders from Mexico, the United States, and Canada in advancing the vision of a powerful and united continent. It was this vision that prompted those of us who, in the early 1990s, saw in the NAFTA the promise of a better, more prosperous collaboration of our three peoples. It is a privilege to be associated with the distinguished trailblazers you are celebrating today, the likes of Carla Hills, Jaime, Serra, Juan Gallardo, and Carlos Gutierrez. The dream of a united North America began with the Canada-United States Free Trade Initiative in the 1980s, encouraged by the Bush-Reagan administration and led at the political level in Canada by Prime Minister Brian Mulroney. As my Canadian business colleagues here today know well, the business leadership in Canada played a decisive role in bringing the free trade agreement across the finish line in one of the most hotly contested elections in our history. That agreement laid the foundation stone of the NAFTA. The NAFTA campaign, which followed in the early 1990s, and which was hard fought, particularly in the United States, benefited from the support of business leaders in all three countries. The advantages of the NAFTA soon became clear for all to see in its impact on jobs, investment, and innovation in all three countries. The NAFTA proved to be resilient, surviving the impact of 9/11 and the dangerous threat of President Trump to cancel the agreement. Today, we know the NAFTA by other names, depending on which of our three countries you are in. Where does our three-country agreement stand today in comparison with what we aspired to in those early days? Back then, we dared to dream of a genuine continental free trade area rooted in permanency, with technologically advanced border facilitation, non-discriminatory investment protocols, coordinated approaches to regulatory cooperation, compatible policies in energy, the environment, and labor practices, and embracing of a dynamic, innovation-based concept of North American competitiveness, strongly backed by business groups in all three countries working closely together. We even dared to dream of a North American community where skilled workers could travel relatively freely across our borders. From the outset, our three countries' understanding also committed to achieving the highest possible levels of cooperation in securing the external borders of the continent from military, terrorist, and criminal threats. Exacerbated by drug-related and migratory criminal activities, we are far from reaching our ambitions. Clearly, while we can point to progress, we are far from achieving the vision or the full potential of the original NAFTA promise. In today's world, the overarching challenge to the vision of the Trailblazers are serious political threats emerging primarily from the deeply divisive politics of the Great Republic and the serious problems facing the governance of the Mexican state. Also worrying to me and to many Canadians is the appeal of authoritarianism in some in America and Mexico. Canada is not without its own problems, but in my country, we remain strongly committed, at the very least, to a positive and secure relationship with the United States, fortified by a defense alliance which we cannot live without. This said, the Canada-Mexico connection has promise, but needs a great deal of work. And while our respective bilateral relationships are important, it's worth reminding ourselves the Trailblazers from day one rejected the idea of a hub and spoke North America. Like many of you, my long-standing involvement in the North American business issues has always been based on a core belief that Canada, Mexico, and the United States, working closely in concert, could ensure that the North American region would remain the most innovative and productive in the world for many decades to come. We are clearly not on track to achieving this goal. As an important private sector actor in dealing with this challenge, the North Capital Forum has a vital role to play. I wish you great success. Thank you, and buena ventura.
Bueno, muchísimas gracias a todos y especialmente a los amigos del US Mexico Foundation. Es un poco irónico que me estén dando un premio a mí por cualquier contribución que he hecho a la cercanía, a la amistad entre Estados Unidos y México. La verdad es que yo le debo mucho a México. Yo empecé mi carrera en México. Yo descubrí que yo podía manejar gente, que podía hacer negocios. Yo aprendí todo eso. Yo descubrí a mi empresa Kellogg's en México. En fin, aprendí a trabajar en México. Y eso me ayudó a ir a Canadá, a ir a Australia, a ir a Estados Unidos, pero sin México yo no estaría donde estoy. Entonces, creo que el agradecimiento es de mí para ustedes, de lo que me han dado y lo que he podido hacer para la amistad de Estados Unidos-México es una contribución muy pequeña a lo que ha hecho México por mí. Así que muchísimas gracias a todos. Este es un momento tan especial para México y Estados Unidos. Los problemas que han habido en el mundo con cadenas de suministro, todo apunta a que México y Estados Unidos entren a un periodo de crecimiento, un periodo de prosperidad, de inversión, de empleos. Creo que es una oportunidad que viene una vez en la vida y ahorita la estamos viviendo. Las nuevas generaciones que se están metiendo al servicio público, que tienen un punto de vista, que quieren acercarse y buscar foros, buscar instituciones como US Mexico Foundation para seguir promoviendo la amistad entre los dos países, los felicito. Y por favor, métanse en el servicio público, conocer los temas del mundo, tengan un punto de vista, participen en la obra de servicio público. Eso es una manera de seguir cambiando y seguir acercándonos. Aquí en Estados Unidos hay mucho mexicano-americano que está en la política. Creo que mucha de la gente joven en México tienen que apuntar a una visión a largo plazo, una visión de crecimiento, una visión global y participando en la cuestión pública es una forma muy poderosa. Muchísimas gracias y espero verlos en México pronto.
Carla, I would like to start with an image here. What's your first thought looking at this image? This is 30 years ago. You in the middle signing NAFTA. I think it's San Antonio, Texas. What's your first thought in this image?
First thought is a strong wish that today's climate and interaction with our leadership was as warm, friendly, and productive as in those days. Our president, I could clap for that too. Our president, George Herbert Walker Bush, believed in open markets. He believed in globalization. He believed it not only because it advanced the interests of the United States, but it advanced the interests of the world. And in Mexico at the time, it was President Salinas. And I recall in January of 1990, Jaime Serra, whom I had not met before, we were both at Davos speaking, and he asked if we could have a private meeting. And he said to me, Carla, we are thinking that we would like to have a free trade agreement with the United States. Well, we had just completed a free trade agreement with Canada, which has already been mentioned, almost brought the Canadian government down. It was hugely controversial in Canada. And I said to Jaime, and we've become really good friends since, let me take it up with the president. And I did. And I knew that the two presidents were meeting in June of 90. And I said, don't say anything about it until after that meeting you can issue a letter saying our intent is to negotiate a free trade agreement, which they did. We began quietly negotiating with our Congress, but it was summertime, and Congress takes a break. But and we have to, and Congress in the United States has control over trade. The executive branch has to obtain trade authority to negotiate a new trade agreement, setting forth what are your objectives, what do you think will be accomplished, and if they approve that they will live by the so-called fast-track authority, it means they will amend the agreement. And you can't imagine negotiating an agreement for a year, 2 years, longer, and then having a single congressman plop an amendment on your agreement that the other side was horrified about. So you really need the fast-track authority. Well, we had an election in November of 90, and we had a lot of new faces in Congress. So our obligation was to meet with members of Congress who convened in January. And in that period of time, I got a call from John Crosby, who was then trade minister for Canada. He said, Carla, we want to join this agreement you're considering with Mexico. Why are you leaving us out? I said, John, your government was almost destroyed. The progressive government was almost destroyed by the agreement, the bilateral agreement with the United States. He said, we want to be part of this new agreement. So we had to get fast-track authority, not for the bilateral, for now the trilateral. And we spent the spring in doing that and started our negotiations, or agreed to begin our negotiations in June of 91. 14 months later, at the Watergate Hotel, Jaime Serra and Michael Wilson, who was representing the Canadians, wonderful man, and I joined, and I locked the door and said, no one can leave until we have a deal. And so for 14 days, we continued the negotiation, and at the end of 14 days, we had a few little hiccups. I can remember one that the Canadians may recall. Michael Wilson got up. He didn't like something that Jaime and Serra and I were thinking about. And he got up and he walked around the grounds of the hotel. And Jaime and I looked out the window and I said, do you think he's going to come back? Well, he came back, and by the end of the 14th day, we had the North American Free Trade Agreement negotiated. And it was the first agreement to open up the services sector, to protect intellectual property, to provide a dispute settlement mechanism, to open up markets that had been closed in autos and industrial products, a host of other things. And so this really was changed things enormously. And it was President Bush's dream that this would start free trade from the tip of Alaska to the tip of Argentina. And he said that we would set an example. And interestingly, it did set an example, because the 123 members of the General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade, the predecessor of the World Trade Organization, had been negotiating a new trade agreement to upgrade the General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade, which had no protections other than the reduction of tariffs. And the signing of this agreement really had an enormous push on the trade ministers who had walked away from completing the agreement in 91. And when our agreement took effect with congressional approval, President Bush signed it in December of 92. President Clinton got it through our Congress in 93, and it took effect in January of 94. And in January, when that was made public, the fact is that the 123 members of the negotiating group came back to the table and borrowed protection of intellectual property, protection of services, the various agreements out of the NAFTA, word for word. So we set an example, and that was the launch of the World Trade Organization. So we really had an influential impact, not only on the three of us, but on the world at large. And my wish is we would go back to that harmony that we shared, which made such a difference, because today the polarization globally, anti-globalization, is very worrisome. And that is why I'm such a supporter of the Capital Forum, the groups that bring us together, that have small businesses involved, working groups, and that sort of thing. In the last administration, we pulled out of not only the NAFTA, but we stopped having high-level economic dialogues. We used to have them annually, and it made a difference. It made a difference not only in trade and economics, but on our security, on our health, and a host of other issues. And President Bush, or President Biden, has relaunched them when he came to office in 2021. We've had 3 meetings. The most recent one was in January of 2023. And I'm hoping that we can not only do more but of those meetings, but that we have high-level meetings and working groups on the critical issues that we face today. And we need to have small groups made up of mayors, Rotary clubs, chambers of commerce, people who know what the problems are and what needs to be done to fix them. And one of the gravest impediments that we face is lack of knowledge. I speak for the United States, but the United States has benefited enormously from our open trade. But if I were to walk out the door of my office in Washington, D.C., and ask the first 10 people that I pass, what do you think about free trade? They'd say, oh, that takes our jobs. So we need to have more information about, no, actually, it creates jobs. The North American Free Trade Agreement created jobs. We actually produce twice as much manufactured goods with fewer workers, but not because of trade, but because of technology. And we need to get those facts out. And then in addition, we need to get some remedies to deal with the problems that are on the minds of our population that worry them. More education, more training for the jobs ahead of us. And my view is, if you think the past 10 years were tough, the next 10 years with the technology revolutions going on only faster, we're going to have to step up to it. And thank you for what you're doing.
No, thank you, Carla. And I will stay with this lack of knowledge, because I truly believe that it's the most relevant part right now in the trilateral relationship. There is a huge lack of knowledge in the 3 countries, but how to implement a strategy there, how to get to the people in Ohio, Pennsylvania, Michigan, here in Veracruz, Oaxaca, Chiapas, in Canada. How can we get to the grassroots? It looks like the megaphone or the microphone in the other side, it's so big, pushing back.
Well, we need a microphone.
We need a microphone.
And I think we can form groups. You could start with the companies. I often thought that when we were having a lot of trouble in the United States over the moving forward on trade, that if companies were to put in the W-2, that's the tax form when you pay your workers, a statement saying 30% of our revenues is made as a result of our external trade, our exports. 30% of this check would not be there without that. Put notices in the elevators going up saying, if we have the opportunity to take advantage of markets beyond our borders, and so that you start with that. But we often start at the top with negotiations with presidents, which is very helpful. But if you can get down to the lower level, like a Rotary Club, have presentations at the Rotary Club, at local chambers of commerce. Maybe they could even form committees when you talk about a state where there is a deficit of knowledge, maybe just a small group, maybe 10 of a diverse group. And also we need to train our workers. I think the large multinationals that are changing very rapidly could develop a program that would provide, and I would recommend that the government support it. Think about it. What if the United States government were to post on the internet every open job that existed? You're a person in West Virginia. You lost your job because they turned to technology. And you look on the internet and you see the job that looks pretty interesting out in Arizona. So, but you need a stipend to get there. Federal government could give you a stipend in partnership with the company that has posted the job need. When you get there, you could get the required weeks of training, say 25 weeks of training. And I would suggest the company put you on some sort of a revenue. And then when you're hired into the job, you would begin to pay back the program in taxes. So we can develop a program, but you can't do it with a crowd of 1,000. You have to do it with small groups that are persuasive, that understand the facts, and develop a real agenda for moving forward. We did that with the NAFTA. I can't tell you how many trips I took to meet with the Conference of Mayors and then separate groups, and the Governor's Conference and separate groups. And we tried to capitalize on those that were favorable and told them, you know, that company down there is negative. Try to do something about it.
Carla, I want to ask you about China. I know you are very active in that relationship. What are your thoughts right now on China?
China is challenging. There's no question about it. I had to negotiate with China the first tariff agreement with the Vice Premier, Madame Wu, and we ended up with 5,000 tariff units that they would reduce, some over 5 years, some immediately, some over a longer period of time. When China sought to get into the World Trade Organization in 2001, which was a decade later, I was asked to testify. And I called over at the U.S. Trade Office to say, how has China handled that tariff agreement? And they said, we'll get back to you. And when they did, they had actually abided by every single rule. And so my view is, yes, we need trade agreements, but we also need an evaluation of how they're going as a regular basis and an enforcement mechanism. And with the WTO, we have not been perfect in our implementations of the rule, and neither has China. And I think we could do a better job. I think the WTO, the World Trade Organization, is an indispensable institution for global peace, security, and prosperity.
Carla, any last advice for this crowd, for this group of organizations, business leaders, entrepreneurs from the three countries? Any advice on how to handle this hard future new decade?
I just hope that you can work together. I look at my friend here who is active in the North Capitol Forum, and you who are active in the trade association, or not the trade association, but the foundation. But you could put together groups that could meet, and they don't have to be just groups of Mexicans. They could be groups of maybe Americans and Canadians, or you could start with just a group of Mexicans. Say, what do we need to do? The fact is that the trade agreements lay out a mechanism for working together. The companies work together, labor works together, and we found that certainly with Canada, our relationship has blossomed in terms of security. We need to do a lot more in terms of security with the U.S.-Mexico relationship. But all groups have an opportunity, and I think could make a difference. And working groups, even if you publish a paper, say the high-level working group that is focused on expediting legitimate trade across our border, it has written a report and circulated it. It would make a difference. And the lineup at the border is sinful.
We need to do our part. With that, Carla, thank you so much for being here in person,
My great
for this
pleasure.
conversation, for your thoughts. A big round of applause for Carla. Thank you so much.
Thank you.